everybody to today's interview, today's conversation, which I'm having with Gwendoline Delbos Corfield, member of the European Parliament, very importantly, also member of the group of the Greens, EFA, member of the Committee on Constitutional Affairs, member, these will be the main questions, of the Committee on Women's Rights and Gender Equality. Mrs. Delbos Corfield, welcome.
Hello.
We have been quite impressed, I must say, with this last legislature, by the last years. What has the EU done to promote gender equality, and what are the most important achievements reached in these past years, according to you?
Well, it's been, I think, in terms of achievement, it's been a very, very good term, and it's not always the case, and of course there's a lot of things where we could have been more ambitious, and you can always criticize, but it's been a specific term with achievements that have never been made, and we can be worried about the future, so we really need to stand by them, and it specifically had achievements that are very serious legislative achievements. It's not just symbolic wins, it's things that will become national rules and will be the new common rules in EU for a number of topics. I think there's three that we can focus on more, which is of course the transparency pay gap. So this will be an obligation for all corporations of a certain size to be very transparent about how much they pay their employees and staff. And it's not a little topic, it's a very big topic, because we know today that you can have at the same place, at the same job, for a woman and a man having the same experience, being in the business for the same time, with the same expertise, you can have differences of salaries that go up to 30%. It's not only, of course, an inequality between genders, it's also sometimes an inequality between someone of color and someone white, or based on other discriminations, handicapped, not handicapped, but the gender pay gap is really the most concerning one and the most preeminent one. And this obligation to be transparent will help not only anyone to know what his or her colleague is paid at the same exact place, but then to ask the boss of the business justification about this, why, and then to say this is not legal, because you will need to have only a 5% difference between salaries, and once again we have today up to 30% of differences sometimes, so it will really improve. And if you don't get justice done, when you can go to justice, you can go to Court of Justice of your country and then to European Court, and this being a rule, you know, European Court will say this is not legal and this is not possible. So this is a major difference. You know that there's some women, we say that at a certain number, at one time in the year, women have already done their part of the job. If you compare their job and what they get in money, it's been a real inequality for years and injustice for decades, in fact. So this is a really important thing. The second one is, of course, major one is the gender, the directive on violence against women, or violence based on gender. This is also very important. This will give all of the member states common references, common definition, and obligation for training in justice, for training in police, obligation for having shelters to welcome women and others that are suffering from violence. It's not as ambitious as what we would have wanted. We wanted a definition of rape very specific for all of the member states. That would be a definition based on the fact of non-consenting to the sexual relationship. This was resisted by a number of countries, and sadly one of them being France, but Hungary and others. But it's still the first step, because it's the first time we have a big frame for all of EU, with obligation to fight against violence based on gender. And when you know how many femicides exist in EU, everywhere in the world, but in EU also, it's of a huge importance. There again, it's not a little topic. And then there's one I'm less enthusiastic about because I think it's important, but it's a bit less important. It's also there was a big achievement on parity in boards. So gender parity in boards, women in boards. This is, of course, very important. It's important on a representation point of view, on a symbolic point of view, because we know that when little girls grew up, if they don't see women in sports, in culture, in science, but also in places of power like economic governance and big corporation boards and all this, you grew up as a little girl thinking this is not my place, and I will never be that because there's no woman. So it's really important on that point of view. And it's also very important because, of course, we need gender perspective when big economic governance are made, when big decisions in corporation are made. We know that the lack of gender perspective means that public policies are badly done, or economical choices are badly done because they don't take into account the needs of half of the population. So it's really important to have women in these places. That being said, this is more a niche thing, which is very important, but I have this concern about EU becoming a place very, very useful for equality for women, white, well-trained, coming from privileged background, and we are a bit lacking measures also for diversity, inclusivity, and all of the others. And this women in boards directive is more a law that will help, once again, very, very trained white privileged women. We also need to have policies now on diversity and social precarity and poverty, which we know women suffer a lot from. This is one of the lacking things. That being said, it's also more difficult because this is not strict European competencies. Social issues are more of national competencies, but this is something where we should advance, where we can advance.
Mrs. Delbos Corfield, you mentioned these, we have been accompanying these, of course, different legislative dossiers with also increasing enthusiasm, I must say. So first of all, congratulations to the legislators, all of them. I mean, we just celebrated recently the International Women's Day. What is still, I mean, you referred to the policies of diversity and also policies directed towards, let's say, the less favorable persons or women. What are the policies now to come in the future, let's say, maybe also for the next mandate?
There's no big files waiting. These files have been waiting for years now. The pay transparency gap was blocked for 10 years in council, so that's why we can say this was a term of achievement. The gender-based violence directive had been talked about for a very long time. We also had in this term the ratification by EU of the Istanbul Convention that had been waiting for years. So there's no big file now that is waiting, but we need to advance on all of this, of course. The gender-based violence directive, as I said, it was not ambitious enough, so I hope that we will advance on this more and better. It was a first step. We, as Istanbul Convention, we have member states talking about coming out of it. We have member states not doing what's written in it, so we also need all of this to become effective and not just in words and written. We also have the big concern, I would say, at the moment of the election and just after the election, to get a commissioner for equality again, because this was the first term where we had a commissioner for equality. She was not only about gender equality, she was equality in general and against discrimination, but it was one big part of her portfolio. And if there was these achievements, it's because there was this special focus of one commissioner. And also because there was big push in this parliament. So we need this parliament to go on working on this, having a FEM committee very strong here. So this committee on gender equality and women's rights, having a commissioner again, this could be decided. The contrary could be decided. It's the first time that there was one. Commissioners change name, portfolio changes. You have big constant things like agriculture or finance, but some things are not always there. So this is a first concern. And then we need to advance in the in the term. I would say that there's 3 things where we need to work a lot. The first one is gender mainstreaming and gender budgeting. They go together. We need more and more to think all of our policies with gender perspective. Specifically, we have a problem, for example, we are doing big laws on energy and big climate laws, and we're not at all taking the gender perspective. Women were not the one that polluted the most. They didn't consume as much as the men, and they're not using as much energy, but they could be the one that are the most concerned by new laws and new constraints and new difficult things on money. I know energy precarity is a very women problem. So that's gender perspective is very important, and gender budgeting. There was these big relaunch recovery plans proposed for member states after the pandemic. And we have analyzed that all of the money is going to go to economical sectors that are 75 to 85% masculine sectors. So transportation, aeronautic, artificial intelligence, technological innovation, all of this. This is very men sector. You have up to 85% of men working in these sectors. And for example, nothing was done for care. And everyone said during the pandemic, care was the sector that really helped us. That is where the women are working. So of course we need more women becoming engineers and drivers and working in technology. But we also need money to go to sectors that are mostly women. So once again, a lot of public money will be invested for half of the population and less for the other half. So that's gender budgeting is a very important thing. The second one is working on sexual and reproductive rights. In this term, this parliament advocated for it a lot. There was a lot of support, big majorities in all of our texts for this. And we managed at the end of the term to really get voted texts also saying we want it in the Charter of Fundamental Rights, for example. This is a very important thing because I really always say this. People need to remember this, and it's not known enough. In the last years in Poland, women would die. We can probably estimate it to 10 of them. 10 women in Poland in the last years died in very new hospitals, in good beds, surrounded by great technology, but they were not. There was no surgery done on them because they had a dead fetus on them. They died of septicemia, of poisoning themselves. And the doctors would not intervene because they were afraid of judges, even on already dead fetuses. So in 2023, we had women on the European Union soil dying, surrounded by modern technology and by doctors for very ideological, dramatic reasons. So for this to not happen again, we really need to advance on sexual and reproductive rights. And then we need to go on working on femicides, of course, and violence, because too many women are still dying of this every day in EU.
Yeah, when you look at the figures, especially related to femicides, it's quite horrifying. You were mentioning, of course, the future. I guess you will be running again, I suppose. I wish you all the best for the European elections anyway. But what would be your message also to the voters in light of these upcoming elections? What would you say to them? What are you saying?
Go and vote for any progressive party, but go and vote. Why? Because European affairs and European policies are having more and more influence in your national context, your rights. People don't always realize that how much our civil liberties and our rights are enshrined by EU and in EU text. EU is protecting all of this, but also everyday today consumption problematic and work problematic and social problematics more and more are linked to EU big decisions and EU policies. The same for climate, energy, and all of this. And we could see far right influence come back a lot in Parliament, being very strong. This is a trend that we are seeing. The polls are also showing that, which would go, I mean, these people don't want equality. They want women to stay at home. They want women to be protected by men. They have a complete alternative story to what gender equality is. And this is only because of passivity of the progressive side and passivity of electors and passivity of politics themselves. Today, our societies are much less racist than they used to be, much less homophobic. They are very much more feminist. Women and men in societies are working on this, and in corporations or in everyday life, you have more and more progressive way of doing things, and it is not shown in political results. So this is very frightening. It's because people are not mobilizing on the other side, and the Polish election showed that it's really when women and youth mobilize that we manage to change trends. If Poland has come back on a democratic path with women's rights and LGBTI rights and inclusivity and all this, not ideal yet, but it will come. It is because people mobilized and went to vote. So it's important to go and vote for anything on the progressive side, but not far right, because I think people do not realize how much it can be dangerous. And Poland and Hungary have shown that. You can really see your rights being attacked in a very concrete way. And tomorrow you can have, once again, women not accessing a certain number of their rights only because they are women, if we come back to very reactionary politics.
Gwendoline, thank you very much for these updates and for these messages also to voters. All the best to you. And I look forward to supporting also in the frame of what we can do, the European Parliament in its endeavors. Being the father of 2 daughters, I can only subscribe to what you said. Thank you very much. Last message, we will have our summer days soon by the end of June, and these will pick on the topic of artificial intelligence and the gender bias element. So you will certainly receive an invitation to that. Dear Gwendoline, thank you very much once again.
My pleasure. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.